segment 2, Losing Our Way. You've referred to the Declaration and the Constitution as beautiful documents, significant documents, and you've just told us why, to the extent that one can in a limited time.
Ran on too long.
I quote you again, Larry Arnn. Woodrow Wilson and the founders of modern liberalism called these doctrines of limited government that appear in the Declaration and the Constitution, obsolete. They argued that we now live in the age of progress and that government must be an engine of that progress. Now, Wilson was dealing with conditions that the founders could scarcely have imagined: industrialization, dense urban populations, particularly on the East Coast, enormous waves of immigration. So what's so wrong with Wilson's effort? Maybe he got a little wrong here, a little wrong there, but he's attempting to adapt the American founding to quite new conditions of modernity. What did he get wrong?
First of all, he liked to look back on the founding as a simple age. Remember what it was like. There'd never been such a thing before. They had to declare an entirely new set of principles by which to govern and make war on the biggest force on earth. And they named it, the Congress was called the Continental Congress. Mm-hmm. They hadn't seen the continent, didn't, until Lewis and Clark came back to report to now President Thomas Jefferson in 1805, I think, right?
Yes.
So vast acts of imagination. And then they had to figure out a way for the first free government in history to grow across the continent. In other words, they faced enormous complications. And the idea that the complications of the 19th century are larger is bunkum.
So the first clue that Wilson is off the mark is that he appears to be condescending to people who were very great men.
Yeah, that's right. And, we have simple age, we have more now. But the second thing is a very easy thing to see. It's a core thing. What is the reason behind constitutional forms against which Wilson rebels? Madison says it is written in the fact that we require to be governed because we are not angels. Mm-hmm. But government must be limited because angels do not govern men. And so that means that just as we outside the government require to be governed, those inside the government also require to be governed, and that has to be strictly arranged because they need and they will have a lot of power. Now, the judge right now is very easy to make between Madison's claim that it's an abiding and eternal fact that the equality of man is found in the fact that men are not angels, mm-hmm. and Woodrow Wilson's fact that evolution, which is what he thought was going on, had got us to a place where we didn't have to worry about that stuff anymore. And judge, look at the government today.
Take a look.
Is it impartial? Is it efficient? You showed that speech by Reagan from '64, the time for choosing speech last night. And I'll say to your viewers, described brilliantly, beautifully, how you attempted to emulate that speech in composing another of his greatest speeches about the Berlin Wall. What does he say in that speech? What he says in the speech is what's obvious for all to see. The modern bureaucracy is not politically impartial. It is not politically disinterested. It is obviously and massively self-interested. And what James Madison said, and remember, when James Madison is setting up a limited government, he understands that he himself is likely to be a very large figure in it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't set up a government where he himself can do whatever he pleases, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. He becomes, he and Thomas Jefferson are the founders of the political party that destroyed the Federalist Party and ruled the country for 60 years. He succeeded his friend Thomas Jefferson as President of the United States. He was the maker of the institution that kept the president from being all-powerful. So he's not saying anything against the characters of people who are alive today, except the simple thing that they are human and not angels.
Larry, you've written that some now argue that nature is not really the commanding conception in the Declaration, but history is the commanding conception. And I found that very interesting, the way you contrast those two. Would you do that for us now?
Nature means two things in this context. It means the the thing itself, it means the cup is a cup. It has a cupness about it, makes it a cup. And there's lots of different cups, but you can see the cupness in all of them. So whatever the nature of a thing is, whatever it is specifically, the nature of the human being is to reason. It is the animal that can reason. Now, the second thing nature means is the process of beginning and growth by which living things come to be. The word nature actually comes from the Latin word for birth. So the nature of Peter is to be born a little boy and get older and,
Gray hair. Stop there.
Causes parents troubles until he's about 26. They're 18 to 21 years old around here, we know. And then, you become the man you are. And then I watched you taping a show that you're going to be shown with Paul Ray, and you guys were both speculating about your death, right? You know about that. That's your nature. So when you look at people, it doesn't actually matter from the point of view of nature whether human beings used to be monkeys. What we know is, if you look at the things in nature that are before us now, this human thing is a very distinctive thing. And it can't be treated like a pig. That's a famous historical example. Stephen Douglas says to Abe Lincoln, he says, "You think that I can take my buckboard and my hog into Nebraska and the federal government has to protect my property in it, why not then my slave?" And Lincoln replies, "Just fine if there's no difference between the hog and the slave, but you know the difference. Because if you just look," here's an example of mine, not Lincoln's. I can give you Lincoln's if you want me to. If you go read the Alabama Slave Code, which was a very bad one, there were restrictions on how many slaves could get together and how long they could stay together and how long they could be indoors together. And those were generally waived in the case of meeting with a qualified minister. Now, they put all kinds of fences around their hogs, and they didn't make exemptions for the hogs to go meet the minister. But they did the slaves because they know what they are. That's the nature of the man, and the rights of the man are written in the nature of the man, and you cannot mistake it. Now, if evolution, by the way, evolution, in my opinion, if it's true, and I don't even care if it's true, because it's quite beside the point, if it could repeal that, in other words, if what we think is, and remember, Woodrow Wilson thinks that things are evolving very fast, because he's writing what you're quoting in about 1880 or 1890, and the founding is about 100 years before. And he thinks that all of the fundamental conditions have been repealed by time in 100 years. But have they? You can see that they have not. So if you think that evolution is supplying some standard that permits people to do whatever they want to do, that's only a good idea if they're not still people. But what if they are? What if the nature of the man persists? What if it's true that you and I, people of goodwill who've known each other a while, and would be ashamed if we knew about each other that we did something wrong? What if it's true that neither of us is quite the man that George Washington was? Nature. Something made him really great. Doesn't happen very often.